Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Ed McCann, the founder of Writers Read. I'm your host for today's show. We create memorable experiences for you, our guests, and our YouTube viewers, and for the writers whose work we feature, whether they are established or emerging, and whether published or not. Because at Writers Read, it is all about craft and a writer's ability to present an engaging personal story. And the stories we feature on our stage and on our YouTube channel and in our podcast are just 5 minutes long. We are delighted to return again to City Winery's beautiful flagship location here on Manhattan's West Side to celebrate writers and writing and wine with you. We launched Writers Read on Father's Day weekend in 2014, and so we are celebrating our 10th year today, right now. Not only that, but this show is our 5th Carnegie Hall Festival partner event. Carnegie Hall's theme this season is The Fall of the Weimar Republic, Dancing on the Precipice. And it is a powerful exploration of one of the most complex and consequential chapters in modern human history, with the rise of the Nazi Party and the near collapse of democracy. Yet despite the turmoil and upheaval of the Weimar period, the arts and culture flourished as artists sought bold and innovative avenues for creative expression during a period of radical change. So we are broadly reflecting Carnegie Hall's theme today with a show about changes, and the stories you'll hear were curated from well over 100 submissions from talented, passionate writers whom we asked to describe a change that they'd made or had been wanting to make in their life or their relationships or their community. I am proud to present the work of these fine writers, and proud this event is presented with support from the New York State Writers Institute. And I have to pause here to say that from our modest beginnings a decade ago on that June afternoon at Nancy Manicherian's The Cell on West 23rd Street, I could not have imagined that this organization that I built with my writer friends would one day become an official Carnegie Hall season festival partner, with City Winery as its most excellent venue partner, and with sponsor support from the New York State Writers Institute, whose mission dovetails so nicely with ours. I will tell you more about the Institute shortly, but right now I am genuinely excited to open Act 1 of our show with Margie Holt Smith. And Margie Holt Smith is a Philly girl who fell in love with New York City as a student at NYU. She finally made it back 25 years later when she met an Upper West Sider and convinced him to marry her. So that all worked out. In between, she had an Emmy-winning television career in Philadelphia. She waitressed in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and she sailed across the Atlantic in a 30-foot boat. She's a volunteer mentor with the Divisible Inc. writing program for cancer patients at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and today she owns a writing business and recently published her first book, Not on Any Map: One Virgin Island, Two Catastrophic Hurricanes, and the True Meaning of Paradise. Now, Margie knows in her bones that when you have a talent and a passion for something, it will follow you no matter where you live or what you do. And I'm so pleased to welcome her to the Writers Read stage for the first time to share her story. Wherever you go, there you are. Please give a warm Writers Read welcome to Margie Smith Holt.
The blow knocked the wind out of me. I was flailing in the crystal blue waters of the Virgin Islands next to a sailboat that had capsized, with me on it. I needed to get the boat upright, pushed with all my might on the centerboard for leverage. It wouldn't budge. The sailing instructor, floating calmly, watching me struggle, righted the boat with no help from me, and we clambered back on. "Did you get hit in the head with the boom?" she asked. "Yes," I sputtered. "Hard?" "Yes." "Get used to it." Back on land, I dumped a gallon of fresh water from a plastic jug over my head, wriggled into dry clothes right there in the parking lot, and raced to a burger shack called Skinny Legs, where I was a waitress in much the same way I was a sailor. What the hell was I thinking? I had been on television in Philadelphia, a star reporter, always camera ready. There was proof, even in the remote tropical outpost I now called home. A bartender had discovered one of my old 8x10 glossy headshots and tacked it up over the cash register. "Manager on duty" scrawled underneath. "Hey," said my boss, genuinely surprised when he saw the publicity photo. "You used to be on TV?" His newest waitress didn't look like she even owned a mirror. I had ditched makeup, couldn't find my blow dryer. The last guy to cut my hair delivered beach snacks from a powerboat. My journalism career, which I loved, had come to an abrupt end 3 years earlier. I was forced out for, take your pick, too old, too expensive, too mouthy. Today, you'd get a lawyer. Back then, you just moved on. Next came a PR gig. Not a passion, but a steady paycheck, better hours, perfect since I wanted to get married and have kids. When that blew up too, I did exactly what no practical, rule-following good girl ever dreams of doing. Quit my job, sold my car, bought a one-way ticket to the Caribbean. "What are you going to do?" sneered the ex. "Swab the decks?" I didn't know. Maybe. "Is this some kind of a midlife crisis or something?" asked one of the millennials at work. Well, I was about to turn 40, so hard to argue with the math. I moved with no plan, vowed to do nothing resembling my old life, but the local newspaper editor, or was it my old life, stalked me, tricked me into writing. Instead of presidents, I interviewed pirates. Wherever you go, there you are, a t-shirt hanging in the Jolly Dog souvenir shop, taunted. Being an island reporter had its perks. I wore flip-flops and researched over rum cocktails. At long last, a chance to test my theory that a glass of wine or two might make me a better writer. I interviewed Santa Claus, off duty, at the bar. Santa drank vodka soda with a splash of cranberry. "How's your daughter doing down there?" relatives asked my mother. "Has she found herself yet?" "I don't think she's looking," my mother replied. "How are you really doing?" my friends wrote. "Have you changed?" "Yes," I'd say. "I look like I did when we were 13. Like when we were girls, planning our lives." Was it hard to make such a drastic leap? People want to know. They mean the change of address, but harder by far was the career change. I had defined myself by what I did. Reporter. Who was I without the title? I did finally learn to sail. I sailed across the Atlantic Ocean in a 30-foot boat with no engine and a bucket for a bathroom. It was an epic adventure. And later, when back-to-back hurricanes destroyed the paradise that shaped my future, I covered the story. 20 years since that life-changing move, I'm a different person, still a journalist, more myself than ever.
Anthony Murphy grew up in Lancashire, England, originally honing his voice in the spoken word scene in the UK. He now lives in Yonkers with his family, 2 dogs, and other assorted wildlife. He also hangs out downtown in Manhattan, where he's associate producer of the spoken word event Rhymes of the Ancient Mariner. A bit farther north, he's published work in the Westchester Review that was nominated for the Pushcart Prize. He's published several poetry chapbooks and illustrated children's books, as well as a novel, Shiftless, published by Atmosphere Press, and that's all just for starters. Anthony's a regular contributor to Writers Read, and in the story he presents today, he recalls being a very young man attending a concert that was both raucous and revelatory. Here to read Gin for Tea, please welcome back Anthony Murphy.
In North Manchester General Hospital, I lost something I could never find again. No, not my appendix. That was at home in a dusty jar. I wasn't even ill. I was 17 and had been suffering only from a primal urgency these last few wasted months. The year before, I had gotten the braces off my teeth and had stopped wearing those thick National Health spectacles. Strangely, My senses had become more attuned. There was the music, the clothes, the hair, the desire. I wanted to become a part of whatever was going on, to get abandoned to it, though I was confused as to what the it was. There was a rock group that had informed my life for the last year. I knew their songs upside down. I could never understand how to adopt their cool, that mystery, but I knew it had something to do with black, sunglasses, and too tight jeans. My hair was a mess, so that was easy. I didn't have all the gear, though. My jobs delivering newspapers to prison wardens and stacking shelves wouldn't get me far. The band weren't glam, more shambolic, so I found an old leather jacket and made do with a tireless school uniform. I had to forego the sunglasses, though, because wearing those in this drizzly town would get you beaten up. Then I found out the band were touring the country. I managed to get a ticket. On the night of the gig, I got an early train to Manchester. It was all new to me. The place was nearly empty, so I bought a pint with a pub regular's confidence and sauntered to the front of the stage to watch the support act that no one liked. As I rested on the barrier waiting for my heroes, an arm touched mine and stayed there. I didn't move even though a shock went through me like I was plugged into the amps myself. Then the arm made movements like it liked being there. And maybe wanted more movements. My arm involuntarily agreed. I hadn't looked over, but I thought we knew who we were enough, being where we were. In our peripheries, our fingers started to dance until we held hands. As soon as the lights went out, the dry ice came up and the strobes began. We turned and found each other's mouths. Drums kicked in and the feedback squealed as the surge of the crowd squeezed us out from the front, pushing us backwards as our grip left the stage, yet we held on to each other. Through the sweaty, formless, joyous throng, we steadily lost our place, but we hung on, lip-locked, and became a tango in the middle of the straggled, pogoing circle. We were oblivious to the show now, familiar songs washing over us as we ended up out of it, breathless at the back of the room. That band back then barely lasted longer than 29 minutes on stage before a fight broke out. It's not why I was there or why I wanted to leave. I loved them. I could listen to their songs anytime. So we did leave. And they wouldn't care. She took me to her room in the hospital. No, she wasn't an escapee. She was a trainee, Nurse Andrea, 19 years old. That night I discovered what all my preening and longing was for, what the mystery was, and my urgency abated. I only had brothers, so some of it was a shock. Menstruation hadn't been covered in biology class by our teacher. She was the terse and blustery Sister Philomena. We are blood, Andrea shrugged afterwards, but, sorry for not saying. At least we're in hospital, I thought. Was I a man now? Now I had it. And yet, I had lost it. Unlike this appendix, I guess some parts of you aren't meant to be kept on a shelf.
Minnette Coleman, a member of the Harlem Writers Guild, grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, where, as a young adult, she wrote entertainment reviews for the Atlanta Daily World. While majoring in drama at Guilford College in Greensboro, North Carolina, she appeared in several productions and was a frequent contributor to the college newspaper. She won 2 poetry contests before moving on to historical fiction, and now she's the author of 3 novels. She's a regular contributor to Writers Read and returns to our stage today with a tale of not only accepting what she cannot change, but celebrating it too. Here to present her story, Being Classic, please welcome Minnette Coleman.
To celebrate turning 60 some years back, my stylist did this amazing job on my hair, then applied makeup so my face was beat for the front row of heaven. Clients in the trendy shop gushed over my new look, and I was feeling absolutely fabulous until the young receptionist said, "Naturally, you'll get the senior citizen discount." Did this heifer just call me old? My face was saying what my mouth couldn't, but I took my 10% discount and left. That was the moment I accepted aging was a change I couldn't control. I detest being called old. It sounds like the end is near. So I've decided to be a classic. Youth fades, but classics linger. You don't become a Rolls Royce in a world of Hondas overnight. And I have the history, hips, and knees to prove it. Hondas think they'll never run out of gas. I felt that way too until my engine failed to start one morning. That's when I decided to modify my lifestyle. I learned to embrace change generations ago. I lived through riding the back of the bus to running the bus company, singing in the chorus to being the female lead, and being told nobody wants to read what you write, to having a small, diverse following, to my literary achievements. When I can't find my glasses that are on my face, when I'm looking for my phone, which is in my hand, or go to the bathroom 4 times a night, I accept my mind and body have changed. I bitch about it. Who doesn't? But I remain a classic with style. Refusing to admit you're maturing is denial. You try to convince yourself people call you ma'am because it's proper etiquette. You don't realize the Hondas say excuse me as they walk past because your gait is shorter and slower. Once I strutted my stuff at the clubs in Tina Turner Hills, my Save-A-Hole flats in my pocketbook. Now flats are my go-to shoe. I couldn't strut if my life depended on it. And the only club I attend these days is Costco's. How can I deny things changed? Life is different when you achieve classic status. There's that noise you make when you stand up, and it's not always from your mouth. There's the 4-year-old asking if you knew Jesus. Personally. And there's joining the electric slide at the family reunion when a niece remarks, "Y'all did this dance back in the day." Letting go of the desire to run over this Gen Xer you never really liked anyway. You smile and elegantly glide on, knowing her day will come. See, there are advantages to being, classic. Partying late means sleeping late. I'm retired and rise when I please. I get discounts at supermarkets on travel and coffee. Now, sometimes my body becomes a weather barometer. When my big left toe twitches, it's gonna rain. The headache I get over my right eye where I had cataract surgery signals the beginning of allergy season. And a major nor'easter should be expected when every joint in my body screams, "Stay in bed." It's a pain in the ass, but I always know how to dress before I turn on the Weather Channel. Unfortunately, this change comes with acquaintances I can't shake. But arthritis and sciatica won't ruin my fun. I challenge them daily by telling myself, all the old folks are dead. I'll drink champagne before noon, hang out with friends all day, and take naps when and where I please. And when I get my hair done, I'll walk past that receptionist telling her, "It's not a discount, sweetie. It's a reward for a life well lived." Being honest, the best revenge is living well. I'm living my life, as the song says, like it's golden, which is why I'm having a hip replacement in a few weeks. Everyone knows you got to repair the parts if you want to remain a classic. And that's why this Rolls Royce will continue to glide.
George Mannis moved to New York City long ago to make his fortune. He did not make his fortune, however, because he ended up working as a journalist. Still, he stuck around and has indulged his weakness for collecting things that no one else values, including souvenir air sickness bags and do not disturb signs from hotels. And the two most prized books in his library are an original edition of Ouija's Naked City and a rare copy of Red Channels, which, by the way, was the 1950 report of communist influence in radio and television. Despite the fact that George is executive editor of AARP, the magazine, and the AARP Bulletin, the largest circulation magazines in the United States, by the way, he has been forever changed by something that's missing in his life. And he'll now tell us about it in his personal story, My Left Foot. Please welcome George Mannis.
I ran into one of my neighbors the other day. He asked me, "How's your toe?" I replied, "It's still missing." I got home, took off my socks and sneakers, and lay on the bed. Yep, still only 9 toes. When I press my bare feet together, ankle to ankle, there's an empty space where my left big toe should be. With all the other toes lined up together, it looks like a big smile with one of the front teeth knocked out. I had 59 good years with that toe. We were, in a word, inseparable. But then came December 7, 2021. I woke up that morning with 10 toes. I went to sleep that night with 9. I'd known for several weeks that this would happen. The blood blister I had noticed on my toe in early September had turned out to be a ridiculously obscure form of melanoma and potentially fatal. Part of the standard treatment, given how far the cancer had advanced, was to amputate the toe. So, given the choice between living with 9 toes and dying with 10, I chose 9. It seemed like a small price to pay. I've spent the last 2 years wondering how small that price really was, which I think is another way of saying, do I want sympathy? Do I deserve sympathy? I go back and forth on this. Some of the things I feared at the outset haven't come true. For years, distance running had been an important part of my life. Would losing a toe change that? No, it turned out. I still have my balance. When I go running, I'm not lopsided. I don't think anyone who sees me going by says, "What's up with that guy?" When I go barefoot at a pool, no one stares at my foot. No one notices at all. One of my biggest worries was that my future grandchildren, if I ever have grandchildren, will be traumatized by Grandpa's missing toe. But then a friend of mine told me that when he was a kid, he thought his grandfather's missing finger was the coolest thing in the world. Unlike the young man who fit me for my orthotic, who got too close to a lawnmower when he was a kid, I didn't lose half my foot. I didn't lose a leg. It may be technically correct to call myself an amputee, but it doesn't feel morally right. The upshot is that I don't deserve sympathy, and I don't want it. Most of the time, that is. Eventually, I'm going to run another marathon, and I have this fantasy about it. I'm going to get myself a t-shirt, and on the back it will say, "Ask me about acrolentiginous melanoma." And on the front it will say, "I only have 9 toes." I want to tell people, you may not realize this, but I'm injured. I look okay on the outside, but I'm suffering where you can't see. Whenever I bathe in this fantasy, I end up realizing, of course, that I'm no different from anyone else. Everyone I know in my life, everyone I pass on the street, we are all suffering inside. We all have hidden injuries that most of the time we keep to ourselves, that other times we want the whole world to know about. So this is how I've changed. My hurt, easy for other people to overlook, reminds me that we all have hurts that are easy for other people to overlook. As I slowly fall apart, I'm more aware that everyone else is falling apart as well. I wish I didn't have to lose a toe to have a deeper understanding of other people's hidden pain. But we all have things that we wish hadn't happened to us. 2 years ago, I thought my 9 toes made me different from everyone else. Now I see that we are all the same.
Bara Swain is a survivor, and while her losses don't define her, they inform her life choices and her art. In her writing, she honors her deceased Mississippi-born husband by setting her plays in the South and the Midwest, using his lilting voice to tell her stories in Smith & Krauss 10-minute play anthologies. Bara attended the MFA program in fiction at the New School, and her parents died unexpectedly during her postgraduate education. 2 years later, she survived a pulmonary embolism and later still a brain bleed and surgery. She's fiercely proud that she's been published more than 50 times since then and been part of over 150 live and virtual productions. In Bara's change story, Inked, she shares how often we make judgments about strangers we see and how often we're proven wrong. Please say hello to Bara Swain.
Every morning, I chose the same elliptical at my local gym. I could drink a 16-ounce coffee before the desk clerk opened up, another East Village resident, and the owner's shiftless nephew. 2 early birds joined me at 5:45 and used the treadmills on the far side of the gym facing the mirror and me. I learned their names eventually. Sara was a dog walker in her 30s, a millennial, inked with Celtic sleeve tattoos, crosses, knots, spirals, dragons. In contrast, a small woman, Marta, 75, 80 years old, maybe older, walked silently on her treadmill, tugging, always tugging at her long sleeve top. I saw it once. Marta's tattoo, black ink, like Sarah's, only the difference was disturbing, unnerving at the least, I'd say. Across Marta's forearm, the print was unmistakable. It read A15410. I began to resent the tatted, blue-eyed young woman. Sarah's sweat, her long stride, her bantering with the desk clerk, and especially her indifference towards her neighbor. Brown-eyed Marta paced herself as she treaded. She carefully laid a newspaper on the console, the New York Times or the Jewish Weekly. In contrast, Sarah's reading materials were eclectic and noisy. She dropped paperbacks on the floor, cursed as she turned the pages of the Village Voice, and snapped the elastic on her tight gym shorts, often to the rhythm of her gait. I spent my workout fantasizing about the two women. I imagined hitting the emergency stop on Sarah's treadmill, causing the running deck to halt and throw her to the floor. I pictured her broken limb decapitating the dragon's head with his open mouth and fangs that orbited her elbow. In contrast, I imagined befriending Marta, listening to her stories over coffee or bottled water. I would serve as a witness to her prior grievances and promise to be grateful for my idyllic past. A past that didn't include SS teams or exterminations or dehumanizing regulations. So, you can imagine my surprise when I saw Sara and Marta engaged in a lively conversation when I appeared at the gym. On a Thursday, later than usual, timing my arrival and departure to coincide with a safe return home after setting off several cockroach bombs in my apartment. The ellipticals were taken, and I quietly mounted the only cardio machine available, a treadmill next to the tattooed women. I listened intently. Marta was born in the Auschwitz camp shortly after her parents were imprisoned and eventually killed. She recalled moving to New York as a young girl. Marta married, was widowed, and had one son. Her son had given her the gym membership as a birthday gift. To take better care of myself, Marta explained with a thick accent. She also expressed her disappointment. I wanted a Cuisinart, she said, and hid the membership papers in a kitchen drawer. When her son died of cancer several months later, Marta found the gift certificate under her cutlery organizer and honored his wishes. Sara nodded and flipped a purple strand off her face. Suddenly, she dismounted her treadmill, approached Marta, and embraced the little woman in her tatted arms. Marta wept silently. I felt ashamed. The next day, I arrived at the gym with my 16-ounce coffee and a book. It was a Friday. I knew Marta wouldn't be there, and at the end of the workout, I approached blue-eyed Sara and waited. Sara slowly came to a halt and looked at me expectantly. I hadn't noticed her soft smile before. I tried to speak casually. Here, I said, extending my hand. I thought you might like this. Sara accepted my peace offering. I watched her painted lips move as she read the title, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Sara looked up, wiped the sweat from her brow, and said, "Cool. Thank you." I recalled my grandmother's favorite sayings. Your health comes first. You can always hang yourself later. And, well, in contrast, never judge a book by its cover. I'm still working on it.
This past year, we have been averaging about 1 or 2 cast members in each show who cross state lines or actually boarded an aircraft to be on our stage, which is so surprising to me. We actually had 2 shows ago, a woman took the red eye from San Francisco to present her story. She had dinner with us, and then she headed to Kennedy to head back, same day. It was crazy. This, which would not be happening if these shows were in Poughkeepsie, by the way. I have to say that. But the winner of today's Longest Commute Award goes to our next writer, Jessica DeHart. She is an Atlanta native, and she lives there with her beloved husband. She began studying French in 8th grade, but became a Francophile while earning her MFA at NYU's workshop in Paris and studying fiction writing at the American University in Paris. She's a contributor to the Buckhead paper, an in-house writer at the Atlanta Ballet, a Washington Square Review reader, and a judge for the American Library in Paris's Young Authors Fiction Festival contest. Jessica says delivering her 3 sons in 13 months was one of the greatest things she's ever done. And while she wished for 7 more kids, they were coming in pairs. She adores fine chocolate and cities with bridges over water, neither of which, she says, is a substitute for deep love. Jessica's at work on both a novel and a short story collection, and her story, She Called Me Bouy, is about a final visit to her mother that changed her and that she continues to revisit today. Please give her a Writer's Read welcome. This is Jessica DeHart.
The last time I saw my mother, we were saying our final goodbye. We stood at the top of an escalator, and she wore my favorite green linen dress. She had never planned on seeing me again. She knew what she was going to do. Still, she smiled widely and said, "I love you, Bouy." We had just finished a long, lingering lunch. She saw how I couldn't keep my hands off my baby bum. Her seeing my life blossom must have been her last box to check. Some mothers' to-do lists are not as long as others. I was going to be different. But she had donned her beautiful green dress to see me, and isn't the color green symbolic of all living things alive and well? It is. Maybe that had been her swan song message to me, go flourish. But only one question remained. How does a mother leave her pregnant daughter so easily? A life for a life? I suppose the world might work that way. She opted for 95 Quaaludes. Having planned on 100, the hotel maid found the last 5 abandoned on the cheap bedspread. I could not fathom a pile of 100 pills, so I won't bend my mind to that visual for too long. In the worst twist of irony, my mother was the lead nurse of the hospital's intensive care unit, saving lives for a living. She used to phone me in the deepest dark of night to come rescue her from herself, from a voluntary death. We had landlines back then. Had she chosen to call me that last night? We were not able to select a pleasant ringtone of cascading crickets like today. Instead, a screaming black plastic Panasonic cradled itself on my nightstand. No way I could have nursed my son and her also, and maybe she understood that. Her final attempt had been the only attempt. She had not phoned me to rescue her from herself. That truth freed me. It instantly exonerated my soul. I have come to understand that we do not kill people, nor can we keep them alive. We can only save ourselves. What if she had called? Only 6 months prior, I told her I was her enabler and that I could not keep rushing to rescue her. She must have been ready to go. Her anniversary of April the 20th never gets easy. I admit, when your own mother leaves you on the most beautiful day of the year, your soul assumes anyone can, some might, many will. But I have remained married. I have stayed. He has attached. I have flourished. We raised 3 thriving sons, and I will be here to watch them raise their children, and so on. I will give them all nicknames and do the very things they adore. These joyous, joyous gestures make small days feel so big. The giving of nicknames and doing their favorite things. Pure pleasure, these things we do for joy. Admittedly, on tough days, my inclination is to bolt, not like she did, but just far enough away to a spot where old pain cannot find me, like running underneath a canopy of trees where the sun shoots rays through the thinnest branches and brightens in my eyes. On those kinds of days, I could run forever. Eventually, though, I tack back and return home. I am different than my mother. I crave love. It calls me. It insists I tack back. We get to make those sorts of simple choices every day, just like the choice to wear a green dress and meet your daughter for one last lunch. I constantly wonder where my next joys come from, even if it is only the slightest sliver of winter sun escaping through some errant, naked branch. I could not imagine a day without it. Same goes for love, same goes for life. She called me Bouy and wore my favorite dress.
Hunter Klein is a Brooklyn-based writer, producer, teacher, improviser, former Little League umpire, and hopelessly romantic New York Jets supporter. After graduating from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in economics, Hunter realized he knew virtually nothing about economics. So he pursued his other passions, teaching, writing, and comedy. With compatriots at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater and the People's Improv Theater, he's performed throughout New York City and recently wrote, directed, and acted in a musical fiction podcast series entitled The Story of Heidelberg, which earned him a Silver Star Award at the National Audio Theater Festival. The Changes story Hunter contributes to our special Carnegie Hall event illustrates that in love, as in life, timing may be everything. Though it also helps if your good timing is backed up with a really well thought out plan. Here to read Divisible, please welcome back to our stage, Hunter Klein.
To call it a party would be generous. The tally of 9 attendees huddled inside my Brooklyn apartment that now, for the first time, seemed spacious. But she was one of them, a friend of a friend of a friend of a cousin of a friend of a coworker of my brother. A 7-leg parlay. Of course, she'd instantly formed a crush on my roommate, as people tended to, while I unfortunately drank and bit my nails. Be cool. Don't overthink it. Mantras that never suited me. By nightfall, we revelers would leave my raucous bash and migrate to the bar, where I did miraculously find myself wobbling off the bar stool beside her. Call it fate, game theory, or sweet Jehovah herself in the form of my roommate's current love interest in someone named Dasha, the fact remained, I had a girlfriend. There were notable discrepancies between the yin of her and the yang of me. Casey was the most organized, decisive, fashionable person in any room she walked into. I was not. Geographically, I hailed from the suburb of Maplewood, New Jersey, in a home built of therapy and nasal sprays. Conversely, Casey was raised in Mobile, Alabama, with 6 dogs and twice as many chickens, all of which I was allergic to. After 7 short years of sneezing, bowling, Bama wins and Jets losses, of nieces and nephews and a love that read left to right and right to left, I was ready to make the easiest change of my life. Easiest change. The words snickered at me as they stumbled out. In my childhood, my mom would lovingly muse that I had a little OCD, a less doctorly way of saying I was a neurotic, fear-stricken mushbag. Whether it was the exactitude of my sandwiches or general inaction unless the clock face displayed a time perfectly divisible by 3, I required external, at times spiritual validators to break routine, shore up my Play-Doh brain, and make change. Enter Casey, who was far better at lending conviction than dividing by 3. As director of operations at her clothing brand, she executed and pragmatized more before 9 a.m. than I generally did in a calendar year. With the overwhelming decisions accompanying a marriage proposal on my platter, I wondered if I might be in trouble. The good Jewish boy in me called my mother immediately, who gave excellent advice. Just do it. There's never a perfect time. For a second opinion, I called my older, happily married brother, whose advice was equally great. You don't want to rush these things. Questions geysered. Who should be there? Where do you hide a ring box in a 550 square foot apartment? I was malfunctioning. They could agree on simply this. Be cool. Don't overthink it. Weeks passed. I concocted, tweaked, trashed, rinsed, repeated. Eventually, we were moving. Boxes would be packed. Boxes would be found. It was decision time, and I tepidly stumbled upon a reassurance that she'd appreciate this change simply as one that I made. It couldn't be that bad. Well, keep listening. The sushi place I picked to set a mood was entirely unappetizing to my date, exacerbated by my unseemly sentimentality and a suggestion for a spontaneous walk in the park in the night's Antarctic conditions. Sub-freezing, topped with a modest drizzle. We stopped at home so she could grab her heavier jacket. The park's conversation would turn from torturous to non-existent, Casey admitting later that this is where she suspected either marriage proposal or murder. By the end of the quietest 3 blocks of our lives, I descended to my knee and made her wait excruciatingly long while I wrestled the oversized ring box from my pocket, stuck, the romantic speech I'd practiced evaporating into the ether. Thankfully, I'd also forgotten photographers to eternalize the wet, tense silence. But I did ask, apparently, and despite a laugh, she agreed. Afterward, I arose and asked for her thoughts. She responded with a deliberation I know so well, It was very you.
Writers Read gives voice to the stories that bind us. And we are a federally recognized 501c3 nonprofit literary organization with a mission to create performance opportunities for writers. We also create memorable experiences for our guests with events like this one, gathering to share food and wine and stories that nourish us all. Our volunteer team is working with us to scale up and attract more writers, more followers, more listeners, and to make the work of these talented writers available to an even wider audience. A portion of the ticket you purchased for today's show flows through to us from City Winery, but the actual funds that help offset our basic operating costs come from you, our friends, and our donors. Your donations are an investment that will help us reach the next level, and I ask that you please consider a tax-deductible gift today in any amount to help us get there. Scanning the code on the back of your program or the green banner in the gallery will take you to the donation page on our website. But another way you could help would be to take the program home with you today and pass it along to a writer in your life. Don't leave it behind. Pass it off to someone you know who might be interested in what we do or who might be interested in having their own story featured on our stage. I would like now to introduce the president of our organization, Sara Caldwell, who is, where is Sara? Here she is. There's Sara Caldwell, ladies and gentlemen. And there I go.
Yes, please. Hi, thank you. Hello. As Ed said, my name is Sara Caldwell Marrone. I'm the board president for Writers Read, and I'd just like to take the opportunity to recognize Ed. Hasn't he been a great host? Let's please give him a round of applause. So Ed founded Writers Read 10 years ago. June 2014 was the first show, titled Our Fathers. It was held at the Cell Theater on West 23rd Street. The vision and dedication Ed has are unmatched, and those who have met and interacted with Ed know exactly why. So please come celebrate with us this September as we continue to give voice to the stories that bind us.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Very nicely put. Thank you, Sara. Thank you. And Sara is referring to, because we are 10 years old, and my niece Jane said, you know, you can't celebrate your 10th year in year 11. Need to get on your stick. So we've been invited to a beautiful Wainwright house in Rye, New York. It's a spectacular place right on Long Island Sound. And apparently great-grandpa Wainwright, during World War I, vowed that if he ever got home alive, he would rebuild this 18th century stone chateau in France on the family's land in Rye, which he did. And it's just this incredible, beautiful place. And they host a lot of nonprofit events. They invited us to host our annual meeting there in January, which we did, which is where, by the way, that was a big deal in January. We transitioned from the kitchen table advisory team that's been steering this organization to an actual, honest-to-God board of trustees, because our ambition is to grow the organization and scale and send it into the future so that it has a life beyond us all. So September 15th, it's 2 Sundays after Labor Day. I thought that would give everyone time to be back from the Cape and everything that you're doing. So please do think about that. We're going to pause here for a short break of about 15 minutes so your servers can take food orders and refill your glasses. And when you hear this bell, this one, which is the bell I grew up, my mother used to call us to dinner with this bell. My sainted late mother, Mildred. When you hear that bell, please head back to your seats for a second half of our show and more great stories. I'm Ed McCann, and this is Writers Read. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back to the second half of our Special Changes show, which is part of Carnegie Hall's Spring Festival program, Dancing on the Precipice. Before we bring up the next writer, I want to thank the folks who helped make this live event here at City Winery possible, from the people here in the house like Joe on audio and our servers. I'm grateful to our Writers Read editors and board members who helped steer the organization, and Sara for that lovely kind of tribute that I didn't expect, and thank you for that too. And today I'm especially grateful to our sponsor, the New York State Writers Institute at the University of Albany. Their mission is to explore and teach the craft of writing, to celebrate diverse voices in all genres and foster a vibrant community of readers and writers who engage in meaningful dialogue. Their Visiting Writer Series tops the list of many programs and festivals and workshops conducted throughout the year with the goal to enhance and celebrate literature, writing, and performance, and, get this, to recognize the position of writers as a community within the larger community. We writers are a community within the larger community, and for a decade, Writers Read has been building community with people like yourselves who've drawn closer to our organization by attending our events or sharing your work. And these are people I have come to think of as my tribe. And we share an interest, a passion, or a unique talent, and I appreciate opportunities like this to connect and interact with more of you. And I am grateful to the Writers Institute for their acknowledgement and support of our community. And you can learn more about the Institute and its programs and events at their website, which is nyswritersinstitute.org. And let's please give them a hand of their own. I am genuinely excited to tell you that Darcey Gohring opens Act 2 of our show about changes. Darcey is a writer, editor, and an instructor who specializes in personal narrative and memoir. She's the head of Zibby classes and also hosts Zibby's writing community, where she organizes weekly online sessions with hundreds of writers from all over the world. For 6 years, Darcey was the managing editor of a lifestyle magazine, and she's held almost every position in the editorial field. Her essays have appeared in Newsweek, HuffPost, Insider, Scary Mommy, and others, and she was a contributing author for the anthology Corona City, Voices from an Epicenter, where she shared her experience of being diagnosed with breast cancer in the first few weeks of the pandemic. Darcey has served as the keynote speaker for conferences all over the United States, and in her story, I Could Tell You, she tells us about her past with all the perspective of her present. For her first trip to the Writers' Read stage, please give a very warm welcome to Darcey Gohring.
For many years, if you asked me about the experience itself, I could tell you the actions, the things that took place, the way he slammed me against a wall, or punched me, or bit me. I could describe each incident clinically, like something I had watched but hadn't necessarily been involved in. I could tell you about the 2-room cottage in the mountains of California that we lived in, the way he taught me how to split wood and stoke the potbelly stove, and also how when things turned bad, there was no escape. I could tell you little things too, like how I was wearing my favorite gray ragwool sweater the first time it happened. I could describe the texture of that garment, coarse and soft all at once, and the frayed threads on its cuffs. I could tell you after we broke up, I never wore it again. I could tell you when I lived with him, I took baths just so I could sit in the tub alone and inhale the scent of the homemade soap I'd bought that winter. Sweet Plum was the name handwritten on the label. I could tell you that a boy sitting next to me in the library commented on the smell. It reminds me of a bowl of Fruity Pebbles cereal, he said. And it made me smile because I felt so dirty inside. I could describe the silver ring I wore then, the curves of the metal, the small red stone set just off center, and the way I stared at it after each time he hurt me, because everything about that ring and what he said to me felt like a lie I wanted to keep believing. I could tell you about a plane ride home to visit my family. How when I looked out the window and saw the skyline of New York, I began to cry because I knew I was safe and I wasn't going to go back. I could tell you when I came home, I was not the same person, that I had nightmares for months, that I threw away every single card or memento he ever gave me. I could tell you that what I wanted most was to forget it ever happened, and forget the girl it happened to. I could tell you the things people said when I told them we had finally broken up. It's about time. Why would you have gone to live with him to begin with? Why did you stay for so long? And I could tell you, because of what they said, I didn't tell them everything. But I could also tell you that just because words aren't spoken, it doesn't mean they aren't felt. Words matter, and they mattered even more at 19. I could tell you that years later, I stopped in the middle of a therapy session, suddenly aware that for most of it, I had been mindlessly telling a story. A car ride, him angry, him punching me. I don't know why I'm thinking about this. It happened so long ago, I said to the therapist. But as I told the story, I began to see it from the perspective of who I am now, a mother, the wife of a good man who had always loved me kindly, and a woman who was more educated. And I could also see myself as I had been then, a girl who had never been in love before, a girl who didn't know what love was supposed to look like, a girl who thought it was her role to please, not to be pleased, a girl who thought it was better to keep quiet than to be a burden. I could also see the moments I had lived before it turned bad. The one where he danced with me in the kitchen, the one where I read a book to him, his head in my lap, and I stared up at him smiling, and the one where he said, "I love you," and I believed him. And I could feel that girl still inside me, and I knew I could tell her what she'd been waiting all this time to hear. It was never your fault, and you deserved so much more.
After 36 years of teaching in the Midwest, Dwight Watson relocated to the Hudson Valley. His journey to New York was preceded by a childhood in North Carolina, theater in the South, marriage in Alabama, life in Los Angeles, where his first son was born and who now teaches at Mount Holyoke College, and decades at Wabash College in Indiana, where his second son was born, but who now makes music and beer at Plan B Farm Brewery in Poughkeepsie. That's Farm B, B-E-E, Farm B Brewery. Today, Dwight enjoys time with his family, time writing, fly fishing, drumming, and collecting LPs. A member of Howell Playwrights and the Dramatists Guild, his plays have been staged near and far, and his writing appears in journals and anthologies, and like many of us writers, filed away in desk drawers. Making room for change and getting rid of old reminders of our past is easier for some of us than others, and in Dwight's story, Shred the Files, he describes how his pending retirement also became a reckoning. Please welcome back to our stage, Dwight Watson.
An owl brought them into view. Weaving through the arboretum as if he were on some aerial pathway, he settled on a tree. I watched from my window while he remained perched, unhurried. An unusual visitor on campus I wanted to photograph. I left my building and walked toward the owl. He sensed my human awkwardness, and before I could shoot, he flew away. I was left staring at the tree. I remember this bird watching now from my office. I'm here to get rid of things, to make room for the next person to occupy this space. My first challenge is to purge the files in 2 vertical cabinets. Books will follow. I'm not sure what I'll do with this rock from Alcatraz given to me by a student. It seemed likely that the gift wasn't a purchased souvenir, but something he took while walking the grounds. Maybe in retirement, I'll offer restitution and return the rock to the prison. But now, I'm looking at files. I'm one of those who is nostalgic, who keeps hard copies of exams, supposing that his paper record is more reliable than a computer. If I had more faith in RAMs, random access memory, clusters and clouds, and relied on my computer's storage, I wouldn't have to face the packed cabinets. I could delete and go. But here I am. I took a picture of the tree instead. The tree was one of two that had been planted years before I arrived at the college. 30 feet apart, they had reached their peak and stand tall and fantastic. Why had I not seen them before? They'd been in my view for over 30 years. How many times did I walk past and never notice? Is it possible to feel ashamed at not noticing a pair of trees? I open the cabinet drawer. The first file I encounter is assessment. I close the drawer and walk away. The trees are black locusts, so tagged by an arborist. And while they seem old, their limbs disfigured, I hope I never count their rings. Instead, I wish to admire the rough bark, deep furrows that signify that these trees have endured great stress and survived. They stood tall when a storm ripped the roof off a building nearby. Later, their roots gripped soil while excavators moved earth to build a fine arts center. They seem almost indestructible and remind me of the importance of resiliency and that there is beauty in age. It's not like the cabinets hold secrets. It's not like they're classic Mayan stelae on which mysteries of a civilization are inscribed. How important to me is the decipherment of my assessment documents, budgets, personnel reviews. There, I shred thee. What about grant proposals and reports? Some good things there, but no, I shred thee. What about advisee folders? Their names appearing on tabs like errant shoots on a tree. Here, their academic plans, declarations of a major, courses added and dropped, their transcripts. These files record the turns of college days, of dreams, of disappointments, of GPA, and I shred them, all reluctantly. While exams I shred joyously. Now the rest. How do I let go of the courses, the syllabi, and lesson plans? What about the folders of plays directed and annotated scripts? Is it possible I may need these things again? Give it a moment. Exhale. I'll start over if I must. And so I shred thee. Alice Walker published The Color Purple the year I finished my first year of teaching, 1982. Sometime later, I wrote this Walker quote in my notebook. Us sing and dance, make faces and give flower bouquets trying to be loved. You ever notice that trees do everything to get attention we do, except walk? Alice, it has taken me a few years to notice, but I do. I have two perfectly good vertical file cabinets looking for a home.
Lynn Edelson has been writing memoir pieces for 15 years, and her narrative essays have appeared in the New York City Listen to Your Mother show, Carnegie Hall's Voices of Hope Festival, her story blog, and Every Family's Got One. And she was a finalist for the 2023 Eunice Williams Nonfiction Prize. Lynn is the mother of two grown sons, and she's convinced that neither of them is ever going to buy her a beach house. She's just... And she and her husband, Michael, live and garden and write in the Hudson Valley. Lynn is a frequent contributor to Writers Read, and she is currently and always working on a collection of her essays. And in this one, Fifth Period, she describes a reluctant and incremental and indelible change in her relationship to her mother. Please give a warm welcome back to Lynn Edelson.
When my friends asked me to cut Fifth Period to apply for a job at the mall, I didn't hesitate. Unlike my brother, the Eagle Scout who graduated Phi Beta Kappa, I was the bad kid in the family. I took money from my mother's wallet, cut classes when I could, and smoked pot in the student parking lot. When I lied, and I often did, I knew how to cover my tracks. My mother was always suspicious, knew exactly what I was up to, but could rarely prove a thing. But skipping a class to apply for a job was almost legal, if not honorable. Well, it was until the ride back to the high school when we lit up the joint. I have Spanish next period. I said, Mrs. Siegel will know. Oh, stop being so paranoid, they told me, as I took another hit. When I walked into the classroom, the attendance officer was talking to Mrs. Siegel, and both of them stared at me. He led me to his office. Where were you Fifth Period, he demanded. Your mother's had an accident. I almost started laughing because I was so stoned, but I made myself cry, hoping this was the response he was looking for. It hit the right note because he did soften. Now, he said, she's still alive. Turns out she had fallen and broken her ankle and was in surgery. 1 week later, my mother came home with a cast up to the top of her thigh. They were going to hire a nurse to help her while I was at school, my parents said. Someone who would cook, who would clean, and help her bathe. But the house was getting dirty, we were getting hungry, and my mother needed help getting washed. I stayed home the first week to make sure she didn't fall over her walker. I'd help her to the kitchen table next to the yellow wall phone with the long cord and listen to her talk to her friends while I made the beds. We're trying to find someone, I heard her say. Then a silence. I called her, she said. She can't do it, and it's too expensive to go through an agency. I pulled the vacuum cleaner out of the closet. Don't, she said, I'm on the phone. Could you get me the salad from last night? It went on like this for weeks until we all knew that no one was coming to rescue us. We were in this alone. I went into school late. I fed her lunch at noon and was excused from 8th period. I cleaned, went food shopping, and made her mahjong friends tea when they visited. And instead of hanging out after school, I sat with my mother at the kitchen table, and we made dinner every afternoon. Chop the garlic smaller, she told me. I learned how to make her tomato sauce, her meatballs, her chicken soup. While we worked, she told me stories about our family, secrets she had never shared. As my mother got stronger, she told me to spend more time with my friends. I'll be okay, she said, so I did. But when the hash pipe came out, I passed. Come on. I've got to be home by 4, I said. Why? Asked Sybil, whose mother was never home. I have to make dinner. Oh, I have to make dinner, she said, imitating me, rolling her eyes, and everyone laughed. When her ankle healed after all those months, my mother gradually took over the housekeeping. I helped when she needed it, but I got to be a high school kid again. It was not until she was serving dessert to my father and my Aunt Rita that I realized something had changed. She put a cup of coffee in front of me for the first time. "For me?" I asked. "For you," she said quietly. And I knew that she knew.
Marshall Messer was raised on Long Island, and he says he hopes you won't hold that against him. Marshall's been a cab driver, a bartender, a garbage man, an actor, a stay-at-home dad, and an English teacher, and he's played blues harp at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. His novel, Change at Jamaica, published by BMA Press, explores the shipwreck of an ill-adventured youth. Marshall retired from teaching high school English in 2019 on the eve of the pandemic, and is currently working on a second novel dividing his time between Manhattan and the Berkshires. As a young man, Marshall well understood the rules and the codes, both spoken and unspoken, that governed his family's daily life and kept relationships on keel. Marshall's story, A Groovier Way, illustrates how a single violation of that code, a single broken rule, caused an irrevocable change. Please welcome back writer Marshall Messer.
You don't know what the hell you're talking about, my father was fond of telling me. Or, just do what I tell you. Or, don't be an idiot, become a lawyer. If my dad wanted your opinion, he'd give it to you. Behind his back, we called him the captain. The summer I graduated high school, I worked for the captain, who was a rare coin dealer. In July 1969, the silver content in a dollar of change was worth $1.18. My father speculated in silver by buying dimes and quarters in bulk from around the country. The coins came in $1,000 bags, and he purchased up to 50 a day. These were shipped air freight to JFK, where he picked them up in a brand new Cadillac with heavy-duty shocks. Each $1,000 sack weighed 57 pounds, and drove them to his store in Midtown. There, the bags were recounted and resealed, and then conveyed to a bank on Wall Street, where they were turned into contracts on the commodity exchange. When he and my mom went to Philly for the annual coin convention, I was delegated to stay behind, charged with picking up and transporting the shipments. For 3 days, I fulfilled my duties faithfully. But when Thursday rolled around, I was in a quandary. If I made the afternoon run to Wall Street, I'd be too late to meet my friends. We had our own convention to attend that weekend, Woodstock. Going meant defying the captain, not playing it safe, and flouting responsibility. But how boss would it be to hear all those bands, to check out the counterculture, to let my freak flag fly, finally? What would I regret more, staying home or striking out on an adventure guaranteed to be a total pisser? To my callow 18-year-old brain, it was no contest. I left $30,000 of bagged silver in neat piles on the showroom floor and took off. Overnight, Woodstock Nation became the 4th largest population center in New York State. The Daily News proclaimed hippies mired in sea of mud. And what was the experience like to a sheltered kid from Franklin Square? hanging out on the groovy way, rapping with folks who are living off the grid, digging the varieties of hippie style, waking up in a pasture as the cows ambled by, eyeing the girls skinny dipping in the pond. And then, wrecked on some righteous weed, rocking out to the Saturday night lineup of Santana, The Dead, Creedence, Janis, Sly, The Who, and The Airplane. My mind was blown. I got home and slept 14 hours. When I woke up, my mother told me I was fired. The captain wouldn't speak to me. Choosing Woodstock cost me much more than the price of the tickets, which I stupidly ripped into confetti when it was announced that the concert was free. My relationship with my father tanked instantly, and things between us were still rocky when he died suddenly 4 years later. But at Woodstock, I peeked through the doors of perception and glimpsed a brave new world of possibility. And once those doors were ajar, to quote the Jefferson Airplane, 1, 2, 3, remember what the dormouse said, feed your head. After college, I didn't go to law school. I got a master's in literature, then I became an actor, a musician, a teacher, and a writer. My therapist likes to remind me that it's always 4 p.m. on Thursday, August 14th. It can confront me like that, the choice either to feed my head or starve it. I know now that change doesn't happen once and for all. Like a recovering alcoholic who must choose sobriety every day, you got to keep on keeping on. 50 years after Woodstock, I guess I'm still in process. And if I keep working at it, how's that old Sam Cooke tune go? I know a change is going to come.
Anne Levin is a writer, she's a book reviewer, and she's a former editor at the Associated Press. Her creative nonfiction's been published in Sensitive Skin, Southeast Review, Hunger Mountain, Mr. Beller's Neighborhood, and many other literary magazines. She was also a regular contributor to Writers Read. Anne lived through a terrifying time in her life many years ago, and when the specter of that terror appeared again, she knew what she needed to do. Here, with her personal story of change not really over, I'm pleased to welcome back Anne Levin.
At the beginning of the year, I decided to clean out my drawers to make way for the new. That's when I discovered 4 empty pill bottles tucked in the back of my cherry nightstand for OxyContin, dexamethasone, Zofran, and Compazine, their faded labels yellowing from age. Then it hit me. Those were the drugs I took in 2004 when I was diagnosed with a cancer I was sure would kill me. Now it was 2024, 2 decades later, and this was my memento mori, like a skull in Shakespeare or a Renaissance painting of a thing I never wanted to forget. And yet I had. With rueful regret, I realized that I'd forgotten quite a lot, mostly the pessimism and the fear. All that remained was a weird kind of nostalgia, not for the disease itself or the grueling treatment, but for the way I was back then, focused, determined, willing to do whatever it took to survive. At a minimum, that meant surgery, chemo, and radiation. But also, hours on phone calls and emails with my employer's health insurance company and human resources department. Hours waiting to talk to doctors. Hours in the hospital for tests or treatment. The whole time, my goal was 100% compliance, because that, I was convinced, was the only way I'd survive. And I missed it. That frenzied desire to turn in an A+++ paper and an extra credit book report at every step of the process. Because these days, it's a different story. I sit at my messy desk, surrounded by heaps of papers from my medical providers, barely able to bring myself to read, let alone comprehend, the latest explanation of benefits. Weeks go by without me doing the 5 or 6 basic things that everyone knows are beneficial to your health, like eating oatmeal, lifting and stretching, or even just walking around the block. That's when the nostalgia kicks in, and I wish I had a shred of that old belief that my life was on the line, and my doctors were the T-800 Cyborg in Terminator 2. Come with me if you want to live. Then, at the end of January, I went to my PCP for my annual physical, and she found a lump in my breast. Told me I should get a diagnostic mammogram and ultrasound. And suddenly, to paraphrase Faulkner, the past wasn't over, it wasn't even past. Goodbye nostalgia, hello dread. In the 2 weeks it took to schedule the scans, that other time came flooding back. I imagined the reaction of friends and family when they heard the news. Sympathy, cards, baskets of food. My mind hurtled forward to the inevitable biopsy, surgery, radiation, chemo. Also, the wills, the wig store, all the papers and forms to update and sign, my husband standing by to run interference and make excuses for me when I couldn't bear to talk to one more concerned person. Only this time I was sure I wouldn't be as lucky. When the day of the tests arrived, I realized that I'd forgotten nothing. I knew the old routines all too well. Shower, avoid using deodorant, powders, lotions, perfume. Take the number 6 train to Midtown. Fill out the forms on the clipboard, the same information you've been telling them for 30 years. Get undressed, don a robe, surrender to the machines. Then wait, shivering in your overly bright cubicle while your doctors interpret the results. Turns out the scans were fine. The radiologist didn't see anything of concern. I followed up with my gynecologist, and she didn't either. The 2 weeks of terror turned out to be a false alarm. But all that nostalgia that had shrouded my cancer memories in a benign and gauzy haze, all of that was gone. And I knew that if this thing ever did come back for me, I'd find the motivation to get my paperwork in order.
Sara Bracey White and her husband live in Ossining, New York, but in her heart and through her pen, Sara is a Southern storyteller, mining her life for poems, essays, and stories. Her memoir, Primary Lessons, was transformed into an immersive dramatic musical, and her other literary works include The Wanderlust, a South Carolina folktale, and Feelings Brought to Surface, a poetry collection. Her essays are frequently anthologized, and her work has also appeared in the New York Times, the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper, the Scarsdale Inquirer, and the Journal News. An early, frequent, and enthusiastic contributor to Writers Read, Sara decided early on to embrace change in every aspect of her life. But as she writes in her story, Change of Mind, she's also discovered that the best change often requires compromise. To close today's show, please give a rollicking, rock star Writers Read welcome back to Sara Bracey White.
when I tell people that I am 78 years old, I often get comments like, if you dyed your hair, you could pass for 50. Or, what fountain of youth are you drinking from? These comments are usually voiced by women between 30 and 70 years old who also want to know how I arrived at this age so vibrant and in such good spirits. It's hard to believe I'm 78. I still feel like a 5-year-old exploring the world. When I ruminate on my past, I discover enough memories to prove that I have lived a long time. A lot of those memories I've written about. What I haven't written about before is the many changes I've gone through to get here. Changes that brought me to this place and age with no regrets. At 15, I had already anticipated the changes necessary to alter the trajectory of my life. No husband and children for me, I told my high school boyfriends. No safe school teacher's job for me, I told my high school guidance counselor. No more bowing to Southern segregation, I told myself. I planned to escape the life my parents inherited and decided my own fate up north, where ambitious women would get ahead. It was the 1960s, and change was in the air. Then, just before high school graduation, my mother, my sole caretaker, suddenly died. When I leaned into my uncle for support while standing near her casket as it was lowered into its grave, I remember sobbing, "What's going to happen to me?" My uncle's words, "You always wanted to be in charge of your life, now you are," stayed with me long after my tears dried. Answerable to no one now, I sampled from the vast array of experiences that lay ahead of me as I entered college in Baltimore. I sampled from every smorgasbord I encountered and rejected anything that didn't suit my fancy. I never let anyone else direct the course of my ship, but without a compass, I often veered into the rocky shallows, but I never lingered there long. Full of youthful naivete, I changed majors twice as an undergrad. I changed lovers like one changes the pages of a calendar. I eschewed grad school and entered the work world, where I changed jobs whenever a better one arrived on my horizon. I changed cities when the one I lived in stopped offering me new opportunities. I even changed careers several times. But what I could never change was my desire to prove my dead mother wrong. "You can't have everything," she had often said. "Not if you don't change," I had countered silently. Then, in middle age, against all odds, I married. What was I thinking when I said yes to a union with a man who differed from me in everything from skin color to political party affiliation? I was saturated in love's hormones. I was also seduced by his promise to always respect and support my dreams about a life of equality. I entered our marriage determined to make it a good one for both of us. After the usual honeymoon happiness phase, we settled into the intricacies of negotiating a long marriage. In one especially tough election period, I secretly considered changing marriage for singlehood or for a new husband who would be a better fit for me. But our marriage really wasn't bad. Bob and I were cut from different but complementary cloth. All our marriage required was that two headstrong people learn to compromise without harboring resentment. So I stayed the course and sought ways to cultivate instead of change. Now, 33 years after Bob and I said I do, I realized that my mother was partially right. You can't have everything you think you want. Sometimes you just have to change your mind and realize that what you have is worth holding on to.
Stay with me. Stay up here. Can I have all the writers come on up here? That was lovely. We built Writers Read around afternoons like this one, and it's humbling and it's electrifying to spend this curated kind of time with such a fine group of writers, and I am really proud of what a small group of committed, unpaid volunteers continues to build with me. Thank you again to our venue partner, City Winery, to today's sponsor, the New York State Writers Institute, and to all of you for your support and your efforts here today. There are a lot of moving parts to this organization, and we need help steering it. We have a professional editorial team, and we have the bones of a great marketing committee, although it would be amazing to have someone assist with like a social media marketing and media outreach, which I would like not to be doing anymore. I would love to be relieved of that. We also have open seats on our finance committee. We have a treasurer. That's the whole committee. We have a treasurer. So I'm like, I don't know, like who are the people that want to be on a finance committee? I don't know them. Maybe there's some in this room. I don't know. But if you're interested, please see me. And you can always email your thoughts or suggestions to ed@writersread.org. And speaking of email, as I said earlier, I know none of us want more of it, but receiving our newsletter once or twice a month will let us stay in touch. You can sign up at the bottom of any page on our website. Please take your program. Please tell your friends about us. Please consider a charitable, tax-deductible gift to Writers Read to help us grow, because we can't do what we do without your encouragement and without your support, which is why this round of applause from all of us here on this stage is for you. So please do join us and meet the writers and share some conversation and wine in the gallery just outside those doors. But before we do that, we have one more thing to do. Hold on. Come on forward. Come on up here. Up here. Come on up. Up here. Podium.
Around the podium.
Come on around. We have not practiced this.